when we put things down at the end of the day, often our minds don't switch off. It just keeps on going. But mindfulness allows us to see clearly the thought and say, actually, that thought doesn't need any action right now. So we can just park that one. And what's left as we park it is a natural inner peace, a sense of resting that was there all along, but we didn't see it because our thoughts were just keeping us in the loop. If you want to help people who are in danger of getting depressed, it's really helpful for them to calm the mind and to get that insight, that critical insight that they are not their thoughts, that the thoughts come up and they're just mental events coming and going, but you don't have to buy into them as much as we saw our patients doing, and indeed as we all do from time to time.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Kasim Al-Mashat, Registered Psychologist and Mindfulness Teacher from the Center for Mindfulness Canada in North Vancouver. I'm interested in bringing conversations that can support in creating positive change, well-being, and mindful living. I think you're going to find this episode very interesting. I deeply enjoyed it and I hope you will as well. Mark Williams' wisdom about mindfulness, working with depression, managing our emotions, our thoughts, very practical, including how to let go. And he actually guides us later in the episode through a practice. There's also those of you who appreciate and enjoy psychology in different terms. He explains multiple terms that are so interesting and fascinating. I hope you find it as enjoyable as I did, and I look forward to sharing more of this with you. I'm truly thrilled to introduce today's guest, Dr. Mark Williams. So first, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Kasim.
So Dr. Mark Williams is Emeritus Professor of Clinical Psychology at the University of Oxford, having held posts at the Medical Research Council Unit, Cognition and Brain Sciences at Cambridge and the University of Wales, Bangor. The main focus of his research and clinical work has been to understand how to best prevent serious clinical depression and suicide, and was founding director of University of Oxford's Mindfulness Center that works to prevent depression and enhance human potential through the therapeutic use of mindfulness across the lifespan. I'm so interested in this. He has many books. So we have Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy for Depression, the Mindfulness Way Workbook with Zendel Siegel and John Tisdale, The Mindful Way Through Depression, Freeing Yourself from Chronic Unhappiness, and Mindfulness, a Practical Guide to Finding Peace in a Frantic World. I love that title. And his most recent book focuses on how to sustain and deepen mindfulness through an 8-week program that explores feeling tone, as you explain it in your latest book, Deeper Mindfulness. And by the way, thank you for sending that copy of the book. It's a beautiful book, so really appreciate it. So I wonder if we can just begin. How did you get introduced to meditation in the first place, and for it to have an impact in your life where you've dedicated your life to this work? I wonder if you can share a little bit about that.
So it was a very circuitous route, a rather odd route to discover meditation and mindfulness, because in one sense, I'd been introduced to meditation through a sort of Christian church type meditation when we were training for the ministry, which I did in the 1980s. As well as alongside my psychological work, and we used to go on silent retreats. The sort of silent retreats we did there were not really like the more Buddhist silent retreats, in the sense that it was just a retreat in which you had to remain silent, so people would read or
okay.
So it never enabled you really to come face to face with yourself in the sort of way that a mindfulness retreat offers and invites and challenges indeed. But through my professional life as a psychologist, I'd always kept that really distant from my sort of faith-based avocation, and had not wanted one to leak into the other. So when it was suggested that we go and speak to John Kabat-Zinn about whether the mindfulness-based stress reduction 8-week program might be useful for our work, which was to prevent depression.
Mm.
John Teasdale in Cambridge said this could be just the thing we need to prevent depression. I was a little bit, I don't know about that. At least I thought I was intrigued by the theory, but not that interested in the practice.
Mm.
The theory seemed very compelling, that if you want to help people who are in danger of getting depressed, it's really helpful for them to calm the mind and to get that insight, that critical insight that they are not their thoughts, that the thoughts come up and they're just mental events coming and going, but you don't have to buy into them as much as we saw our patients doing, and indeed, as we all do from time to time. So the theory was very compelling. But when John Kabat-Zinn said, if you're going to teach this, you've got to be a meditator.
Right.
We all thought, this is not necessary. This is not necessary, right?
Yeah, just apply the theory. Yeah,
exactly. Apply the theory, explain it to patients, get them to meditate at home. We don't need to do it ourselves. So John Teasdale did. He went off and did retreats, and but I thought, no, we can survive this without having to do that. And then when we started our research, I found I was like operating with one hand tied behind my back. I didn't know it at the time, but I thought, this is so difficult. I can't quite, it seems like just an ordinary group in which I was just teaching, like a therapy group. It didn't seem right somehow, but I didn't know quite how. Until eventually I decided I didn't want to be part of this project anymore. I would withdraw because I obviously couldn't meditate. I tried and tried and tried to meditate, but it didn't really seem to go anywhere. And I then said, no, you know what, I'm going to give this up. And I felt so relieved when I gave it up. And also John Kabat-Zinn and his colleagues were so kind and loving at that moment when I was saying, no, thank you. They said, that's fine. They didn't make any pressure at all. And I thought, my gosh, they've got something I want.
Oh,
what could this be? And I thought, maybe it's because they meditate. And so I started meditating for myself, not for the project, and discovered its enormous benefits and fruits for myself. And I thought, so that's what I've been missing. And when I next taught a class, it felt totally different. It felt like I was really wanting to know how people were going on, not as a psychologist, but as somebody who was a co-meditator.
Yes.
And that they could teach me as much as I could teach them about the nature and fabric of the practice. And then I really started committing myself to really understanding mindfulness in a deeper way, and how it could help, when it seems to be helpful, when it isn't helpful, and so on.
What a beautiful story. And the whole thing about really embodying it, and you totally embody it. And for the listeners who maybe haven't met you before, it's really felt your sense of presence and calmness. And I had a chance to be with you for 8 weeks in your Feeling Tone program, and I was just really touched by a level of open-heartedness, how you connect with everyone, and just generosity. So I just want to thank you. I know I shared this with you before we began, but I just want to really thank you deeply for your incredible heart and deep mind, like true scientific mind, that feels so balanced with your deep heart. So I just want to thank you for your incredible work, truly.
Thanks, Kasim.
Yes. And by the way, when was that with John Kabat-Zinn, when you originally?
I think we started that project in 93. And I think it must be 95 or 96 that I decided this isn't for me, and just let it go. And then I sort of had this sense of, this insight, this is what it's about. Started practicing, and by the end of that decade was helping to set up retreats and so on, and teaching others about mindfulness in a different sort of, with a totally different sort of attitude.
So can you say a little more about this, discovering what mindfulness is about? Because some people are not as familiar with, like, what is actually mindfulness, and Is it even worthwhile developing? Like, what is this mindfulness thing?
Yeah. I mean, it's the mindfulness as we use it today is a translation of an ancient word, which the best translation is just awareness, I think. Kindly awareness, a sense of lucid, clear attention to what's going on out in the outside world and inside our minds and bodies, moment by moment. It's an intentional focus. So you make a choice to pay attention to what's going on in a way that doesn't, as often happens, get into judging mode, as a sort of inner critic. Right, we're judging ourselves or others against this criterion.
Right.
It's about discernment rather than judgment, I think, really seeing clearly what's going on. That's for me what mindfulness is about, a lucid, kindly awareness.
That piece is so important because we often have constant thoughts, and not all thoughts are helpful. And then when we hear an upsetting thought, we typically want to judge it, like, why am I thinking about this again? Or why, and what does this mean? Do I have, and we can get caught over and over, just getting lost in our own mind.
You get lost in your own mind. And the thing is that the mind is doing the best it can to sort us out, because usually that sense of why is this happening is very useful in terms of analyzing problems in the world. The machine goes wrong, and we say, why has it gone wrong? And we until we understand that, we can't fix it. So it's natural to use the same process in our mind, but it totally backfires with certain things. I mean, the obvious thing it backfires is things like when we can't sleep. I mean, it's saying, why am I not sleeping? Why am I not sleeping? Often, if you ask that, it doesn't help you sleep. So that's a very obvious example when it backfires, but it often backfires with emotion as well. So you have, say, you feel sad, and if you say, why am I feeling sad? Why aren't I happier? That actually makes you feel sadder. So to cultivate awareness of the sadness coming and going, the thoughts that might come, like you might feel guilty about it or angry about it, and seeing those thoughts, here's anger, here's sadness, here's guilt, and here's me being critical, and it discovering a sort of a quiet center from which you can stand and see these things coming and going is a real revelation. And most of us didn't even know that we had inside us a place to stand, a kind place to stand, from which we can see these things coming and going without having to buy into them.
So it's this capacity then, as you're describing it, that we can develop this inner resource. Because often I hear people saying, well, I play tennis and that's my meditation, or I paint and that's my meditation, or I swim. And these are all beautiful, but there's something that's missing, which is, relating to the mind working. Would you say, like, what?
Yeah,
what's?
I mean, you've put your finger on a very important thing, that swimming and pottery and craft and walking and running, they are wonderful, and we know that they increase people's well-being. And if you're doing that, best thing is not to give them up.
Right. Don't stop when you meditate.
And indeed, mindfulness meditation has that element. There's a calming element to it. So that's one good thing. But what mindfulness also has is this insight element. That is, that you get to spend time each day doing something that actually doesn't wrap up lots of mind. So it's not like pottery, which is lovely at getting your mind into your hands, or running, which is getting mind into your feet and your whole body, or swimming, like a similar thing. So with those activities, they are calming, partly because you are active, and your body mind is filled with the activity, which is great. In mindfulness meditation, we almost deliberately set up a situation in which your mind is not filled with activity. People sit quietly or they walk slowly. And what happens then is, suddenly the mind thinks to itself, so he or she's being quiet. So here we go. Now I'll remind them of everything they need to do, all the emails they didn't send, the bread they forgot to buy, that argument they had with their friend. And what's that for? You might think, I want to clear my mind. Well, no, actually, the whole purpose is that's where the mindfulness training starts, not where it finishes. These reminders of emails, they make you feel like I must send it now. So it's a compelling and urgent act. And you get to see it come up, sit with it while it hangs around, and then make a choice. Now, some things you might need in the middle of meditation to run along and do, but most things can wait. And you get a chance of seeing the urgency come up, seeing it really buy into the mind, and then see it evaporate. And with that comes the insight that you are not your mind, that the mind has these thoughts, these plans, and so on. And usually we get driven by our plans. We don't have any choice. But here's, with increased awareness, both you see the urgency, you see the plan, you see the memory, and you make a choice. Am I going to pursue this or not? And with that choice comes a little bit, a sliver of freedom. And you practice on things like emails, but that prepares you for when the thoughts turn toxic, like you're useless, you don't deserve your space on the planet, and so on. Because if you've practiced with all these fairly innocuous thoughts, like little things you're meant to do, and you can see them coming and going, there's just a better chance that when the thoughts turn really bad and negative and critical, you get a chance to say, that's one too. That's a thought. And if I can sit here, it's going to be unpleasant, but it's changed. Yeah, it's not completely seized control. And with that freedom comes a big potential release from the grip of the negative thinking.
So you're also highlighting, I mean, a pretty big misconception out there that, meditation, mindfulness, I have to get rid of thoughts. And it's completely the opposite, isn't it? It's kind of turning to them, getting to know them, being with them. And that can be uncomfortable for many people to start, they haven't practiced before. What would you say to someone who's just starting and they're like, ugh, I don't want to feel this sadness. I don't want to feel this. I'm annoyed or restless, or my mind is everywhere. It's not good for my brain, but for someone else.
So I think it's really helpful to know to have certain ground rules for yourself before you start. One is that in most mindfulness courses, you'll spend time not, focusing on the thoughts, but you'll focus on something else, like your body, like different parts of the body.
Right.
So you'll be filling your mind with something other than the thinking mind. It's more the sensing mind, with the toes and the heel and the knee and so on. By just bringing attention to different parts of the body in turn, you're first of all filling your mind with something other than thoughts, but also you're learning to engage your attention in one thing and then disengage your attention, shift it to something else, then engage with something else, then stay there for a while, then disengage. So you're training the attentional muscle to pick itself up, shift it, then land and stay for a little while. That's really helpful. And having done that, it's still important to know that if at any time your thoughts, feelings get overwhelming, you can stop. You can open your eyes if they've been closed. You can stop the meditation. You can open your eyes and count things around the room. Focus on sounds, for example. So it's important to know that although you might be willing to meditate and even be with these difficult thoughts, you may not have the resources right now. You may not have the capacity. So it's important to be kind to yourself and ask yourself, is this what I really need right now? And then leave it for another time if you're too tired or too overwhelmed. And by doing so, it enables you to come back to it if you really want to give it a go, with the sense of when your mind wanders, it's not a mistake. It's what minds do. It's what minds do. And you're quite right. We're not trying to clear the mind. For these 10 minutes or quarter an hour or however long you've given yourself, we're going to just sit and see what comes up and see if we can sit there and do what it says to do, because we offer guidance. So there's a voice on a CD or on a download that takes you through, that doesn't leave you in the lurch for too long, that takes you through what to do and what happens if your mind wanders, and then practicing with small things like buying bread. And then if there's lots of toxic things, then you've done the preparation.
Right. So it's something that grows in time, and I really appreciate how you said it. Just being kind and patient and giving oneself, permission, and not forcing. Sometimes people come to meditation training, and it's like I'm just gonna do this, and then it's like this overexerting, forcing rather than just adjusting, working with, being with. One of the things that you mentioned as well, I know you have so much research, but about inner peace. And before we get to, I have many things I'm curious about in your books and even your latest book, but I'm wondering about inner peace. And, can inner peace be fostered through meditation, that research? What can you tell us about that? I know you mentioned freedom.
So it is. So in a sense, we're not aiming for relaxation. In fact, we're not aiming for peace. But that sense of relaxation and the sense of peace is like a byproduct or fruit of the practice. So it's a bit like digging a garden. You don't expect the flowers to bloom or the fruit to come just after 3 days of digging around. You dig
Right.
and so on. You water the plants and so on. And then, as you say, there's a bit of patience involved. But what many people report, and we've done research on inner peace, if you ask that question, people will say, yeah, that describes exactly what I felt at the end of 8 weeks. And it's difficult for them to explain exactly what it's like. It's difficult for them to put into words. But we would suppose that it comes from those moments of freedom, that sense of being able to let go of something which formerly had gripped you, and that most of us are thinking most of the time, and that's what the world calls us to do, and it's not a problem except when we start overthinking and where we just can't switch off. So I mean, one of the examples we use in one of the books is, if you look at gazelles on the African savannah, then they're grazing quite quietly until then a lion appears or a leopard, and then they take off. The herd takes off and runs like crazy. And if it's the lion's lucky day, it drags one of the herd away. So clearly they got stressed and into stress response and reaction really quickly, which they needed to do. Interestingly, once the lion has captured thing, dragged it off and so on, 5 minutes later, the herd goes back to grazing. It's the alarm switched on when it was needed, but in the animal species, it switches off generally when it's not. Animals need to graze to live. And with humans, our alarm switches on because we needed that sense of gearing go for our jobs, for our families, for everything, for our hobbies. We need that get up and go. But when we put things down at the end of the day, often our minds don't switch off. We aren't like the gazelles. It just keeps on going. And that's partly because even though a danger is past, or the moment of sort of needing full effort is past, we can second guess it. We can overthink it. We can think of all the things we have done compared with the things we should have done. Counterfactuals, it's called. We can think about what's going to happen tomorrow. And if the gazelle thought of that and was consumed as the herd said, oh my gosh, tomorrow, what's going to happen tomorrow? If the lion might come again, they'd never get back to grazing. So the most powerful evolutionary development thinking then begins to backfire and doesn't allow the alarm to switch off. But mindfulness allows us to see clearly the thought and say, actually, that thought doesn't need any action right now. So we can just park that one. And what's left as we park it is a natural inner peace, a sense of resting that was there all along, but we didn't see it because our thoughts were just keeping us in the loop.
Yeah, this overactivated alarm system that we keep fueling, fueling. And, you also speak about rumination and entanglement. And can you say about these, how we get caught, and really this links to the benefits of the practice and how it can free us from that. So can you say a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things, when you ask yourself, well, what is all that thinking doing? I mean, it's an amazing facility that we have, but what is it actually doing? And one of the way to think of it is it's like it's doing a sort of problem solving which works in the outside world. And if you think about problem solving, like getting from A to B, let's say you've got to take your car to the garage to have it serviced, right? You know where the garage is, or you put your GPS sat nav on.
Yeah.
You know where your destination is, you know where you are now, or at least your sat nav knows where you are now. And then it closes the gap between where you're now and where you want to be. And when the gap's closed, you've arrived. You can turn the sat nav off or turn off your inner sat nav. Yeah. So in order to solve problems in the world, you need to know your destination, you need to know your current location, and you need to close the gap. You need to focus on the gap to make sure it's closing. Well, that works well, but think about it in the case of sad mood. Maybe you go for a walk around a lake one day and you're feeling sadder than you'd like to feel. You know, it's the sun shining. You should be feeling great. So you say, why am I feeling like this? And so problem-solving mind gets in. So problem-solving mind says, Kasim, remember where you are now, sad. Kasim, remember where you want to be, happy. Look at the gap. That's the way to solve the problem. Now, so you're aware of the gap between, I'm feeling sad, stay there. I want to be happy, stay there. Keep that in mind. But just say to yourself, I want to be happy, I want to be happy, I want to be happy. And what happens? You feel sadder. So the very locking down of your destination, which a sat nav has to do to get you somewhere, and the very what's your current location, which a sat nav has to do, in this case, just reminds you of things that you haven't got yet, like sadness. I'm feeling sad at the moment. I want to be happy. There's a huge gap between what, you know, where I am and where I'd like to be, but perception of the gap makes you feel sadder. That's like a sat nav, which takes you further away. You know, when you look at the sat nav, you don't affect where you are by looking at it, but when you look at your inner goal of feeling happy, it makes you feel worse. So that's where you get locked in, because the very problem-solving mind that gets you out of most situations 95% of the time, when applied to your emotions, locks you in and entangles you. And so we talk then about how mindfulness shifts modes away from a problem-solving mode, which is beautiful in solving problems, because it uses mental time travel. It can go on, it can switch on automatically. It needs to lower the past and the future. It needs to tell you what to avoid and all those sort of things. We switch to a being mode in which you let go of the mental time travel, live for a moment. You just rest in this moment. You see your thoughts as mental events instead of telling you the truth. And you check in with how tired you are in a kindly way, so you don't just carry on until you're exhausted, which is what the doing mode would do. Just carry on until you've got there, and never check in enough to see how you're feeling. So shifting modes in this way enables this different way of being in the world, which you can experience in the practice when you're doing formal practice, but after a few days of formal practice, people notice that out in the world, they're going a bit more slowly. They're noticing a few more things they hadn't noticed before. They see people who they at work who they've seen as a bit angry. They're seeing them, they look a bit sad. You're changing your perspective on things. And those are some of the early fruits of the practice that many people report.
So getting to meet people and moments a little differently, like there's some shift that happens. And I wonder, is this part of the many benefits of mindfulness on mental health? I'm wondering, I know you've done quite a bit of research and mentioned many of these in your books, but what would you say some of the top mental health benefits? Obviously, preventing relapse of depression is quite a amount of research you've done on that. So what are some of these benefits on mental health.
One of the things about John Kabat-Zinn's original work, which is in a physical hospital with people with chronic pain and physical illness, was that he was teaching people to become aware using things like body scan. And I mean, that itself was a courageous thing to do when you think about it, because people with pain fancy the first thing to do, or one of the first things to do in the first session is to increase their awareness of their body. You think,
right.
But what he intuited is that pain is not just physical, intense sensations, but it's a lot of thinking about it, like I'll never be over this. This is ruining my life, and lots of feelings that like hopelessness, emotions, hopelessness, and anger, frustration, and that people in pain are not just a physical problem. That's bad enough, but the physical problem is then is becoming attached and entangled with a lot of horribly, for very obvious reasons, self-destructive thinking, critical thinking, angry thinking, and emotions, which stick together like a limpet. They can't, and they bring awareness to them, they tend to float apart. So you see the thoughts, you see the emotions, and you see the intense sensations, but now you can see the sensations sort of a little bit more changeable than they seemed when it was just locked together. And so that, although that was he called it a stress reduction program, it was for people with physical problems and challenges, it was already a mental health program. Because he said, look, anything that is being created by stress or maintained by stress can be helped by this program. And so when we then took his program and worked with him to adapt it for relapse prevention and depression, it was already, in a sense, a mental health program that we were now taking into depression, but it's been used for PTSD a little, for panic disorder, for ADHD, and but in our work in depression, we were interested in it because we wanted to offer it to people who weren't at that time depressed, who were vulnerable. We knew they were vulnerable for depression because they'd been depressed before, sometimes quite recently, but they were better now. And we wanted something that could prepare them so they would reduce the risk. And we thought if we could teach ways of shifting modes from this doing mode, this driven doing mode, into a sense of being, so they could recognize the warning signs of when they were getting entangled, and then step back and say, I see what's happening now. What's the best gift I can give to myself right now? That would work. And then we found, as you know, that it did reduce the risk of depression for those with the longest history and most recurrent depression. We've also found that it reduces suicide ideation, and also, interestingly, uncouples suicide ideation from sad mood. Even where there's still some suicide ideation, some ideas are, I can't bear this. One of the things that we know about when people are at greatest risk is it's when depression is at its most severe. So if you can uncouple those things, so that depression sometimes comes and goes, perhaps suicidal feelings comes and goes, but they're not entangled and fused together, that then allows a greater sense of distance from it, decentering from it, or what Steve Hayes calls cognitive diffusion. You can stand back a little and see the grooves coming and going. And that's the critical thing that seems to help in mental health.
So decentering is not getting so lost at the focus of a thought, so kind of tied to it. That's for decentering. Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do at first because these thoughts come with, and they're so vivid. Because they combine with the mood. If you're feeling sad right now, and then you get the feeling, I'm useless, I'm worthless, there's an immediately, it feels right, because the sad mood, and here's the thought, and they hug each other. They get entangled with each other.
It becomes evidence.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes evidence.
False evidence.
Sad mood was just sad mood, or the thought, I'm worthless, was just coming out of a clear blue sky. You might be able to say, that was a weird thought, oh, there it goes, right? I don't have to take it seriously. But when they come together, they
Mm,
really fuse, and they set up this really um, highly imageable scene in the mind. Well, we
mm,
know from other psychological research that whatever is highly imageable is more believable, because the
um,
mind has very, I mean, how does the mind know what to believe? Well, one way that all of us know what to believe is whether it's highly imageable. Get
mm,
a clear view of it, a clear and distinct idea, as Descartes would have called it. That's what we tend to believe. And so when we get bad mood, bad thoughts, it produces a highly imageable thing, so it's more believable. Yeah.
so the image might be, what came up to mind is you're describing this as someone getting into some accident, car accident, and the trauma of that in the moment, and then in the future driving again. Some people, the alarm system becomes alert, hyper alert. So I guess these are images that are forming of, I was in an accident or something bad happened. Oh, this is going to happen again. And there's this, yeah, and I think you've done some research about health anxiety as well, which I can imagine similar, because maybe some illness has happened in a family or to someone, and they go, well, it happened before. Now I worry about everything. So is that what's happening when you're saying more
Yeah.
of the image?
Yeah, exactly. So
Mm,
when you get a very clear image of and in fact, we've done research on the sort of images that come to mind,
mm,
and
mm,
they're very painful images. People with health anxiety have sometimes a clear image of their deathbed, for example.
mm.
Very often, not a very pleasant image in the sense that, there might be nobody is around,
Yeah.
or everybody who is around is just crying and so on. And so it's a very strong image and very difficult to dismiss.
Mm,
Um, and people, uh, because it's very highly imageable, um, it's very believable. And people think, well, if it's that strong, it's just sensible, that's what's going to happen to me. And it may happen due to whatever I'm feeling at the moment. No, I can't quite feel my heartbeat, or my heart is racing, or this, I feel dizzy, and this means
mm,
I'm obviously going to have a stroke, or I'm going to collapse, um, and these ideas are much more frequent and intense than most of us have. And most of us have
mm.
these cautionary images from time to time. Let's be careful,
Right.
so on. Let's take steps to reduce risk and so on. But these begin to absorb. If they absorb people, then they often then go to seek medical reassurance. They have all the tests. Now, most of us, if we have all the tests and the doctor says, you know what, you're okay, your heart's fine, your blood pressure's great, and so on, and most of us say, oh, that's good, and we wouldn't think about it
Mm.
anymore. But with severe health anxiety, there's a sense of they've missed something. They've
Yeah.
missed. I need to go for another test. I need to get a second, a third opinion. I need to have a test,
And that's
and
the thought part.
that's the thought part. And
Right.
because you can't shake this belief,
Yeah.
because these are normal psychological processes. The image is very strong, and therefore the probability feels very strong to you. What
Mm.
mindfulness does there is to enable people to see why it might be creating that, to understand the mechanism, and then when they've understood the mechanism, to see the mechanism really in their own lives, and to begin to decenter, to defuse from it, see it
Mm.
going, and um, take the sting out of it, because they've been told, they know intellectually, but now they can see emotionally what's happening to them and what they can do to reduce the stress of it all,
Mm.
and to begin to trust that, yeah, all of us have things that go wrong with us from time to time, but uh, for them it's become all-consuming, and often associated with depression as well, and uh, and they're not living their best life. So
Right.
they want to, I mean, people who come to us want to
Yeah.
change, obviously, and they want to understand it, and then they want to be able to do something about it. So they need a clear explanation, and then they need something they can do.
Mm. As part of this, you mentioned the predictive mode and predictive processing. So is this part of what's fueling that imagery of things going bad or worrying, or I'm not going to get the job, or the relationship is going to go bad? Like all that is that aspect part of it? You mentioned predictive, and I wonder if you can explain that as well. What is this predictive processing?
So we've known for a long time that the mind saves time and energy in processing the information in the world, by organizing information into sort of schemas, into patterns. So when we see a small part of the pattern, it's easy and it saves us time to think, okay, that's the whole thing, and that saves us time. For example, when most of us talk, we might be talking at 150 words a minute. 3 words a second, maybe up to 3 words a second. But if we only can make a decision on what is being said to us once per second, we need to chunk the information. And we chunk the information by making guesses about what somebody is about to say. So when somebody's talking, as I am, it's quite possible to understand that the conversation will not go off in bizarre directions, but it will stay into a relatively normal pattern. And sort of, if I was talking about politics in the UK, for example, and I talk about London, and in London there's the houses of, I was about to say Parliament.
Right.
And so you don't even need to listen. As soon as I've got the P out, you've heard Parliament in your mind's eye. You've heard me say Parliament. So you don't need to focus on that. And you can therefore use that little time to understand what's going on.
To save energy.
To save energy.
Yeah.
To save energy. Now, what neuroscientists now say is that that's even more extreme than we thought, that a lot of our experience of the world and the colors and sights and sounds are actually created by our predictive mind, and that normally we just sort of millisecond by millisecond predict what's going to happen. That is our experience, unless any data contradicts it. And sometimes it's obvious when data contradicts it, like when you go to a shop door, a store, big store in the downtown, and there's a big bar, to pull to open the door, and it doesn't open. So you pull the other one, that doesn't open. You think, oh, the shop's closed, the store is closed. And then you see a little sign saying push. And you realize actually you've been pulling rather than pushing. And it's because the whole environment seemed to say pull. The big bar on it seemed to say pull. And your predictive mind said, so pull. And it takes just a few seconds and sometimes you might actually go away thinking the store is closed. But the predictive mind has given you the information it thinks you need, and you've pulled, and then a few seconds later you see the sign push, or you see somebody inside the store and you try pushing, and away you go. So, or if you coming downstairs and you think you've got to the bottom step, but actually there was one more step to go.
Right.
Or you thought there was one more step to go and you actually got to the bottom step. So you've made a prediction and the prediction's slightly wrong, and then you have to suddenly take the
adjust. Yeah.
You have to adjust. So if that's the case, the predictive mind is sort of feeding us these mental models all the time. We're working off a virtual data stream, and we're checking in with the actual data stream from time to time. But since we have a virtual data stream, that virtual data stream can sometimes just take off by itself, and we can just go into sort of a imagination mode, daydreaming mode, what some meditation teachers call a trance. Tara Brach says, we're just in a trance quite a lot of the time. And then we can miss, swathes of our lives. We miss driving down the highway, or we miss we might even miss our children's smile. We're so wrapped up in our thoughts, and
we're not there for it.
We're not there for it.
Yeah.
We're not there for it, and we are entranced by our own predictive mind, which does such a great job. And unless we're doing mindful walking, for example, then the body's pretty good at feeding us a bit of information into the brain, which we just copy and paste. In the next moment, we just copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste, because how difficult can walking be? We don't need to, until we step on a bee, why would we need to know what walking feels like? Because we feel like we know we're walking. And so we have these little examples of illusions all the time. I mean, for example, the center of our eye is sharp, but the peripheral eye is blurred. But we don't think of what's around us as we sit here looking at this screen as blurred. Why? Because we know at any time we'll turn our eyes this way and that, and it'll be a sharp image. So we imagine things in the peripheral vision as being sharp. Actually, phenomenologically, they're blurred. The predictive mind has given us the idea that it's all sharp, despite the fact the retina is telling us, no, it's blurred. So it's very useful, saves energy, as you say, saves time, but it's a system which can easily be sort of subverted or taken over by low mood, by anxiety, stress, because we don't collect the data which contradicts the virtual data stream. If we see somebody frowning, for example, we immediately think, oh my God, what have I done to upset them? We don't sort of go back and check, oh, they weren't wearing their glasses, so that's why they're frowning.
That's right.
Right. So we don't actually collect the next bit of data, because we then is consumed. Our predictive mind has already told us they don't like you. That's why they're frowning. You've done something wrong. And then we've started to remember and getting information from the past. And now our predictive mind is getting information from the past to confirm.
So instead of being in the present, what's happening right here, we're relying on information that could be useful at times, but sometimes it misleads us. It's not accurate. And as you're sharing this, I thought about a question that comes up a lot for many is, I want to let go of the past. How do I let go? Does meditation help me let go? And you've kind of actually spoken about this, but how do we let go?
It's a fascinating and a difficult subject, because the mind's job is to not let go of things that we haven't yet completed. I mean, that we now know that attention will tend, in the outside world and to our inner states, will tend to be seized by something that is uncertain. When sitting in a bar, if there's a TV screen in the corner, try as we might, we can't stop looking when it flickers. We might be in the middle of an interesting conversation that we really want to focus on, but then something happens in the corner of our eye and the flicker takes us away. I'm so sorry. No, it's just somebody scored a goal and I'm not even interested in the match, but somebody, now it's because the mind is geared up, has evolved to go to regions of uncertainty, to resolve this uncertainty just in case we need to take action. We are living action systems, and that's true of our minds. That it's like something from the past or something that we suddenly thought of is like a flicker in the corner of our minds, a region of uncertainty, a region of incompleteness. So our past has all sorts of things that we often haven't closed the file on. It's perhaps a difficult relationship, an argument with somebody who used to be a dear friend, or somebody we felt we'd wronged, something we regret from the past. And we do a pretty good job of perhaps getting on with life, but sometimes they come back and haunt us. And first of all, I think knowing that that's what the mind is doing, that it's not a mistake, is quite helpful. So we can sometimes, instead of criticizing ourselves for being haunted by this, to actually say to ourselves, or at least to the mind, I understand what you're trying to do here. Bring kindness to the mind rather than sort of criticism, and then focus on something other than what the mind would like you to focus on. So it's redirecting to one of the chosen anchors in your body, for example, your feet, contact with the seat, your breath. Many people like losing the breath, or your hands on your lap, or something in the room, or sounds. So that's, I think, the first thing, to acknowledge that the mind is just doing its job. I think the second thing that comes out of our most recent research is to recognize that what maintains, so if something comes up in the past, we can't stop that, but we can affect what happens next. And often in ways we don't understand often, or we haven't ever practiced anything else, we inadvertently fuel the reoccurrence of that memory. So the memory comes, it's not pleasant, and then we do something like this problem-solving mode to keep it alive, actually. And one of the things we now know happens is that one of the things that, if it's unpleasant, it immediately starts off a sort of, okay, what can I do? And what can I do is often fueled by the sense of, we don't like the unpleasant. We just don't like unpleasant things. And why would anybody like unpleasant things? And in our recent work, we've been just inviting people, when they have a nasty memory or a nasty thought stream, instead of when they notice it, in order to let go of the tendency to start, what can I do about this? To say, this is unpleasant, acknowledging it's unpleasant, and then perhaps adding, I don't have to like this. I don't have to like this. In fact, it's okay not to like it. It's natural not to like it.
Oh, yes.
That for many people, and it takes a bit of practice. It's part of what we've done in the most recent book of Deeper Mindfulness. It takes a little practice, but what people say again and again is, somehow I don't have to like it. It's natural not to like it. It's okay not to like it. Releases whatever it would have been that would have tried to keep things in place so you could analyze it and work on it and stop it from happening again. Ironically, by saying it's unpleasant. It's unpleasant. Of course it's unpleasant. It's natural not to like it. It's okay not to like it. And that, people find, really releases something that would have naturally kept it going.
I have to tell you, literally, I used that last night. Literally. Learning it from you. I used that, and I was in bed, and some difficult family situation, and then it kept popping up in my mind. And I could feel it in my body. And literally, I use that. It's like, it's okay that, it's okay not to like this right now. It's okay. And it truly, it felt, it just did this, untangled me from what this mind was wanting to do. Is like, I can't believe it's happening. And when it keep repeating the same thing, when is it going to be over? It never will end. This will never get better. Like it just feels like the assembly line gets in full force, like the conveyor belt, like the whole system and all the gadgets, like do.
Yeah.
But mindfulness seems to like, okay, we don't need to have all these conveyor belts right now. And there's something else that you say that I so appreciate is there's actually being grateful for the mind, even though it's upset right now, but bringing gratitude to, well, you're trying to help me, mind. Thank you. I just don't need that now. So gratitude too. I mean, you speak about that in your book, this Deeper Mindfulness, gratitude. Just hard for some.
It is very hard.
Yeah.
And it's especially when what the mind's doing is bringing you stuff you don't want. I mean, be grateful for that. I mean, some people like it to a puppy that brings you slippers even when you don't want your slippers. But this puppy is a bit of a demon. I mean, this puppy brings you really horrible stuff. And yet the process underlying what the mind is doing are the same processes you need for remembering to do tasks, to remember to take your pills, to remember to get your appointments, to remember. And because the mind is very sensitive to incomplete things you need to do, and it brings you that. It doesn't distinguish toxic from non-toxic things. So we can at least bring understanding or kindness or gratitude to the process of the mind, even if if the content is toxic,
Right.
and with all the caveats we've said about feeling you can take a break, or that you can focus on something else, you don't have to practice this, you don't want to. The sense of what makes the mind, the bit of the toxicity that we sometimes don't see clearly, is the toxicity is fueled by the need, the sense of urgently needing to take action.
Okay.
And so that
Yeah.
we feel the toxicity, but we don't see that what's happened is a sort of a contraction of, I need to do something about this now, and this has grasped this which won't let it go. The toxicity itself is bad enough, but toxicity plus, I need to do something about you right now, is a horrible and even more toxic combination. And even this, of course, we can understand, because there's a sort of sense of the mind trying to get rid of what it doesn't like,
Of course.
So it's all understandable. And so that when a toxic things come, it most often comes, is exactly how you describe, with a sense of, what am I going to do about it? Oh, I don't want to be thinking about this now. Of all the things So it comes with all this machinery you've said.
Right.
Right? And one of the things about saying this is unpleasant is saying this is unpleasant, which refers to that whole mooded mind state you're experiencing, is very simple.
Yeah.
It's like saying, you know what? All you need to know right now is this is unpleasant, and it's natural not to like it. So it sort of cuts through the complexity with that simple, it doesn't say, is this anger? Is this sadness? Is this frustration?
You're analyzing.
It just says, it's unpleasant. That's all you need to know. This is unpleasant.
Yeah.
And it's natural not to like it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else you have to do right now. No action needed right now, which is not a recipe for saying you won't ever have to do anything about it, but it clears the mind of all those busyness, irrelevant actions which we don't need, releasing yourself for a better sense of agency and wisdom when you need it. Rather than clouded by lots of micro actions you don't need to be taking.
I can also imagine, a reactive mind, it's going to be pretty challenging to come up with new ideas or solution when we're struck in this reactive mode, upset mode, trying to figure it out. It may not be very fruitful to get into what can I do about this? We're already reactive.
Exactly. Not in the state where natural wisdom is going to be. In fact, until we have a sense of letting go of all of that machinery, curiously, it's very difficult to find what the wise option is.
Right.
But interestingly, if we can let go of it, very often something comes from left field that we say, oh, of course. And that may come that night, it may come in the middle of the night, it may come in the morning, but very often when we're able to let go of all that machinery of the reactive mind, then it gives a space for the sort of, it's what John Teasdale used to curiously call and beautifully call the great computer within, the processing power of the heart mind.
Yes.
To not get involved with this, but just, and then something comes up from somewhere else in the body mind, the heart mind, which we could have never predicted, which, oh, yes, of course. Yes, of course. And we recognize the truth of it, but not in the middle of that dense entanglement.
Right. Which is how we get caught typically. It's so seductive, right? It's so seductive. It pulls us in. And I wonder, in your latest book about deeper mindfulness, you speak about feeling tones. And I know that's used often in retreats and meditation, mindfulness programs, is feeling tone. And I wonder, is this feeling tone, if you can say, what actually is feeling tone for those who are not familiar, and its contribution to this machinery we were speaking about, getting caught in it. It seems to be like a glue to all of it.
That's a really good way of describing it. The feeling
mm,
tone is just that sense of pleasantness, unpleasantness, or somewhere in between
mm,
that comes with every moment of experience. So whatever we sense through our sense organs or from the internal sense organs or sight, sound, smells, or even the mind, thoughts that come through the mind,
mm,
nothing will occur to us. Nothing will make contact with mind or body that doesn't have some feeling tone. Now, it may be very subtle. It may be somewhere
mm,
near
mm,
the 0 point, and you can hardly feel it. It might be, okay, I can sense the leaning towards, that's a leaning towards unpleasant, or that's leaning towards pleasant,
mm.
or it might be very obvious. If you stub your toe, it's very obviously unpleasant.
Right there. Right.
If somebody bakes bread and offers you, and you're feeling hungry and you smell fresh bread,
Mm,
usually it's pretty pleasant. Yeah. So there are fairly universal pleasantness, unpleasantness,
mm,
but there's also conditioned pleasantness or unpleasantness. I mean, I don't know what your favorite foods are, but a
mm,
lot of that will be based on your biology, but also based on your conditioning.
mm.
And also it might be your conditioning, but also your current context. If you've just eaten a large meal right now and I offer you a cake that you usually like, you'd probably go, oh, no, thank
Yeah.
you. That feels like, oh, no, thank you. You're pushing it
Yeah.
away. It's unpleasant because you're full already. And
Mm,
so we can't make assumptions about what moment, what contact, what sensory contact is going to be pleasant or unpleasant. But how does it act like a glue? Because
mm.
um, it tends to, because we've said we've got these mental models, these sort of predictive models that
Right.
can send us off into a sort of virtual world, um, and those mental models won't necessarily check in with the actual data.
Mm,
Then it uses the pleasantness, unpleasantness as a sort of information about whether we should be pursuing things or rejecting things. And the pursuing or rejecting, the attachment or aversion,
mm,
can then infect and echo and resonate in the next few moments.
mm,
It's almost like there's been captured. The unpleasantness of something, for example, can be captured in short-term memory, like a cache on a computer. So,
mm.
for example, in pain, if you've got a headache right now, then usually what happens with painful sensations is they have peaks and troughs and everything in between.
Yes. Yes.
But often the peak pain is captured because that's the most unpleasant.
Mm,
That's the one that your mind thinks this is what I need to do something about.
yeah.
So it's captured in short-term memory, in the sort of short-term cache, and that is unpleasant. So the unpleasantness of it is the sense of,
Mm,
oh, I can't stand this. And that unpleasantness just echoes on. And which of us is going to look carefully to see if our sensations have changed? Because
ah,
all we need to know is it's unpleasant and it's unremitting and it's horrible. So we don't collect any more data. We don't collect
yeah.
actual data because we think we know what it's about.
It's about
And
virtual model again. You said earlier.
careful modeling,
It's
yeah.
like instead of being present with actually how it is this moment.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And of course, statistically, it's likely it won't be the peak. Of course, there might be another peak, but statistically, it's likely to be somewhere less than a peak. And if
Mm,
and if and what people have experimented with is when you have things like aches and pains, obviously, we don't want people to grit their teeth and bear a pain that
right.
is, that I take painkillers like everybody else if I've got a bad headache, but sometimes it's really interesting if it's not too bad. Just explore the sense of this is unpleasant. If you have a pain, this is unpleasant. This
Mm,
headache or these feelings, um, this is unpleasant. It's okay not to like them, and if we are working off our cache instead of off our actuality,
uh,
there'll be a sense of, oh, yeah, it's not as bad as I thought it was. Um, and it doesn't mean you don't take the painkiller, but there's just interesting to explore
mm,
how much we are relying on the cache. It's almost as if saying it's okay not to like it releases something. It just empties the cache and allows
mm.
you to look again. And of course, it might be that the pain is still there, very intense, in which case you definitely do, you seek help or you
Right.
painkiller. But often it's just that we've got stuck and the loop has got stuck with the severe unpleasantness of it, and the unpleasantness of says, cache this, save this into memory. And we've used that cache as our information instead of looking at the actuality of the pain or the sensation.
Yes. And for those who are not very technically inclined, like actually, like it's kind of memory storing on websites. When you visit something, it's kind of keeping track of things and your usage. So in a way, it's kind of keeping track of things as it's coming along.
And it's used to save energy, because if you search for something yesterday on your computer, if you search again, it'll be very fast.
Yeah, it's already there. It's like, oh, we know what we need. Boom, right there. Right, which may not be accurate for us.
May not be accurate, but exactly.
Is that, sometimes confusion happens between feeling tone and emotions.
Yeah.
What is the difference?
Okay, so emotions are a constellation of thoughts, feelings, body sensations, and impulses that come together to create something like fear, which is both a feeling, a body sensation. It's a lot of thoughts about this is dangerous to me. Impulses to escape, to avoid, very legitimate ones.
Right, survival.
And survival. And so they're an amalgam of these things. And as an amalgam, they don't always have the same presentation. So if you're angry, for example, one day you might show your anger by slamming doors. Another day you might show your anger by sitting quietly and not saying anything, just being very silent. And so they don't always have this, because they don't always have the same presentation. They don't always have the same brain pattern either. So the brain pattern associated with even the same emotion could differ from moment to moment and from situation to situation. So that's why we talk about it as a configuration or constellation of things, any one of which could change, but if the others stay fixed, then we recognize it as love or as happiness or as fear or as depression or surprise or whatever. Now, what feeling tone is, it's a core process that sits underneath all of these things. So love, generally pleasant, but as we sometimes know, love can sometimes be painful. So the core process of what might be called affect or feeling tone, just the sense of pleasantness or unpleasantness, sits at the core of emotions, simpler than emotions, and is thought to be probably arise from our interoceptive processes. So it's part of what's been called the body budget, what keeps us in homeostasis. So Tony Damasio talks about pleasantness and unpleasantness as being there even in single-celled creatures from the dawn of time, because a single-celled creature like a bacterium needs to know when there's nutrients and it needs to move towards the nutrition. And when it's toxin, it needs to move away from a toxin, or a little amoeba with a little thing on its head that needs to move. And so the very first core process in any living being is pleasantness or unpleasantness, or however you call it, sense of toxic versus nutritious, or nourishing versus depleting, or whatever. And so they're there in every emotion. It's a part of every emotion, and it's fundamental, because an emotion can sometimes be pleasant, sometimes be unpleasant. I mean, anger is generally unpleasant, but people can nurse their anger or feel a righteous anger, and it can feel pleasant to be angry. I need to be angry to go to this shop and say, I want my money back.
Refund time, right?
Refund time. So we can't. So emotions are complex. Feeling tone is simple. That's why it's so useful when we get into the complexity of all this, thoughts, feelings, emotions, impulses, and so on, to be able to go, oh, this is pleasant, or oh, this is unpleasant. To allow it to be there.
I can imagine as well, sometimes we can't name the feeling. It's hard to name the exact feeling, but we have the sense of this feels blech, unpleasant.
Exactly.
Right? Like, even like, I don't know what feeling is, but now I'm feeling blah, or so there's
and it's very subtle. It's very subtle. I mean, they've done cognitive psychology experiments which are fascinating, like what you prefer in, which pattern on a cup do you prefer, or and they've manipulated the cups. So some of these were cups or mugs presenting on a computer, and they'd wired people up so you could see whether they were frowning or smiling, and people don't generally know whether they're frowning or smiling if it's very subtle. But they found if the cups were pointing with their handles facing in the direction where it would have been easy to reach out and grasp them, there's a very small smile lighting up the face. And it doesn't have any other effects except produces this small smile. So we can be pleasantly, it can feel like fluent, even though it doesn't feel obviously pleasant, but nevertheless, small smiles can light us up without us realizing it.
So many things influence us.
Yeah.
So many things influence, and I guess that's this notion you bring up as well in the book, this frame by frame. There's a sense of almost like slowing it down. And I know you share a story in the book as well, in Deeper Mindfulness, about a photographer, which I found really interesting. Can you share that story?
Yeah, this was Edward Maybridge.
Yeah.
So he was a pioneer photographer in the 19th century, and he was British, he was English, but he'd moved across to the United States, taken his photography there, and he decided to try to settle a long-standing dispute, which is this, that when a horse gallops, is there a point where it is floating above the earth? Now, if you look at artists over the centuries, they take different opinions about this. And very often they if they do show the horse floating, it's front legs out, back legs out, as if the horse was galloping over something, jumping over something, even though it's galloping on flat land. Anyway, he decided to check this out, and he went to Palo Alto Racecourse, and he put threads across the racecourse, 12 threads in sequence, and at the end of each thread, he had a camera, and the camera was set to when the thread was broken, it would release the shutter for 1,000th of a second. So he would actually have then 12 photographs, and he'd be able to see the whole of the gallop, the sequence of gallop of a horse. And then when as in those days, you had to go and bathe the plates in its solution. And when he had done that, he found that, yes, on one of those frames, the horse was floating. Only one of the frames. So actually, very difficult to see, and that's why no artist had ever captured it. But the photography, thousandths of a second, for a thousandth of a second, at that moment, the horse was floating, and it was floating, I think, with all four legs in, not all four legs when it's going.
Interesting, yeah.
And so it's really interesting, and we use that analogy because what we're asking people to do when we do mindfulness of anything, but certainly with mindfulness of the feeling tone, is we're asking them to do what Edward Maybridge did and see if they can see the different frames in the film. So like, in the old sort of 16 and 32 millimeter films, that you'd see at the cinema, it's all sort of modernized now, but you'd have reels and reels of this film, and you'd be able to see different pictures,
right?
And every picture was slightly different from the last picture, and it's only when the reel is whizzed through the camera that you get the sense of movement in the old movies. Well, can we look frame by frame at our own mind? Right. Then we begin to see that when we were building up anger, depression, sadness, things, if we freeze framed it there, we would see in the corner of the frame, feeling tone, we would see, unpleasant. And there'd be lots of other stuff there, but we'd see unpleasant. And by learning to see that, we would then be able, more likely, to go, this is unpleasant. That's all I need to know. And it's natural not to like it. Always knowing that if something toxic happens, toxic memory, when we say it's okay, we're not saying the toxic memory is okay. We're not saying that person that abused me is okay, that they abused me.
Or what happened was okay.
Or what happened is okay. Or the pain is okay. The headache is okay. We're saying not to like it is okay. It's natural not to like that event, that toxic memory. It's natural not to like the headache. Because it's that that's going to get you entangled. It's a sense of not liking. So
Yeah.
the sense of allowing yourself to know that this is just so difficult, and it's natural to find it difficult. It's natural not to like it. That's really, I think, very releasing for people. And you see that when you slow it down frame by frame.
See, that gives me a clear vision of change, transformation. When we get to see something so clearly, about how we're thinking, how we're feeling, how we're working with things, there's a moment of insight. And I know your program goes over that as well, feeling tone. And would it be possible to guide us in a short practice? I know this gets developed over weeks and weeks, but just to give listeners just a flavor of practice, if they haven't practiced, and maybe a flavor of feeling tone as well. That would be wonderful.
Of course. Yeah. So if people are up for this, they can just put their books, papers, pencils, whatever down.
And if you're driving,
this is not the time.
Not the time to do that.
So do this later. Yeah. And closing your eyes if it's convenient and okay for you to do that now. But if it doesn't, even if you're in your own room and it doesn't feel comfortable, that's fine. Just lowering your gaze, or you can keep your eyes open and just focus on an object. And then for a moment, just grounding the body, noticing it sitting here, and noticing the sensations that are coming from different parts of the body. Maybe the feet, for example. How are the feet now? Just noticing sensations when your attention arrives in the feet. Maybe tingling, vibration. No right or wrong. Noticing what's changing from moment to moment. Some sensations come and go quite quickly, others stay around for longer. So see if we can be aware of this too. And then letting go of the feet and bringing the same curiosity and attentiveness to the contact that your body's making with the seat, whatever you're sitting on. Once again, some sensations coming and going quickly, others staying around. Vibration, sense of pressure maybe. And then noticing what sensations, letting go of the contact with the seat and coming to the breath, and noticing how the breath is for you right now. Just the sensations that tell you you're breathing, maybe at the nose or the chest or down in the abdomen, or following the whole breath if you like. And remaining with the breath as your anchor for this short meditation if you choose, or perhaps revisiting the seat or the feet or some combination. A place you can come back to at any time. Just abiding here for a few moments more. And then at a certain point, expanding the focus of awareness to the whole body sitting here. And noticing sensations. Some may be on the surface of the skin. Some may be inside your body. And seeing if it's possible to notice whether they're pleasant or unpleasant or somewhere in between, just neutral. So as each sensation is appearing, as soon as it appears, feet or legs or torso, head, neck, arms, just registering its tonality. Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neither? This is what we call the feeling tone. And if it's too subtle to notice or it's difficult, just let it go and wait for another sensation to come. Then letting the body fade into the background a little and noticing sounds. around you or inside you, outside the building, inside the building. And with each sensation, sounds, noticing and registering if it's pleasant or unpleasant or neither. No right or wrong. Then at a certain point, let sounds fade into the background and coming to focus on any thoughts that occur to you. And perhaps also the feelings that may come with them or just come by themselves. So now we're sitting here, noticing if any thoughts occur, make contact with the mind. As if we're sitting on the bank of a river and the thoughts were floating past. And if any thought or feeling does come, see if it's possible to register its feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And if it's unpleasant, you could say inwardly, it's okay not to like this. It's okay. It's natural not to like this. Similarly, if it's pleasant, allowing it, savoring it, saying it's okay to like this. Don't have to prolong it or add to it. If something's pleasant, just simply savoring it. It's okay. No further action needed. And then when you're ready, coming back to your anchor, your feet, contact with seat or the breath. Settling in for a few moments more. Receiving whatever sensations there are to be felt. And as this short meditation comes to an end, a sense of congratulating yourself on taking this time to turn aside from the usual things that get us busy and preoccupy us, to work on noticing how we can see clearly in a way that allows us to respond wisely. And then beginning to move fingers and toes, allowing the eyes to open if they've been closed, and taking in your room once again.
Thank you for this guidance. It's so interesting. There's so many things that came up on the pleasant and the unpleasant and neutral, and the pleasant for me was kind of interesting because it was a thought, and the thought was, this is so good, this conversation. I want this to go for hours. I can't wait to watch it again. I can't wait to edit it and just send it out. And then I could feel like, and then, it's okay to like this. No action is needed now. And there was, it was like, almost I can see the mind going, no, but this feels so good. Let it go. And then going to left hip, and this tightness, and my mind, I could see right away wanting to figure out, was this from the hike that I did? Is this, okay, it's okay not to like this sensation. It's no action. Like, it's so quick getting caught. It's so quick, like, boom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that itself is a really important observation, that these things happen quickly. And it's really easy to think that that it's our fault.
Yeah.
You know, why am I like in bliss one moment and in torture the next?
Yes.
Right. What's going on? What's going wrong? And, you know, the understanding, as we like to to see clearly what's happening with the normal mechanisms of mind, it's such a relief to know there's nothing fundamentally wrong with us, and that there's this kindness within that wants to express itself.
Yes.
You're okay, Kasim. You're okay, Mark. You're okay. Whoever's out there, but it's something in us also said, "Oh, no, you could do better. You could do better."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
where it comes from. It's just to recognize that it sometimes is there around the table. It's there at the party, and but we don't have to give it more space than it.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't take over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this beautiful guidance, the book, and actually I have it right here. I would strongly encourage folks to check it out. I know I'll put it in the show notes, Deeper Mindfulness, and it comes with audios as well. That's right. They'll benefit. I so deeply enjoy your voice, your guidance, your kindness, not just today, but just how you've really lived your life and been this beacon for this work. I really want to thank you deeply, and so generous of your time. I know we went quite over, so thank you for your generosity of time and sharing this deep love for creating change and positive change. And I'm wondering, how else can people find you? And I'll put this in the show notes. Is there a certain website you'd like to direct?
You have a website, a fairly static website for mbct.co.uk. And there it explains a bit about the MBCT for depression, how it came about and what it is.
Yes.
And a link there to the deeper mindfulness stuff, to lectures, but also to a series of 1 hour YouTube videos and podcasts. If people want to read the book with a sort of almost a class, then they can get a 1 hour sort of with something I did in 2021, a couple of years ago, on Wednesday evenings for the Oxford Mindfulness Foundation. And then it usually one of the teachers introduces me for 2-3 minutes, and then we give a bit of the science each week and a bit of practice, and then people can meditate and people put in the chat a few things. So it's still there as a podcast, and people can access it through that.
Great.
But now the book's come out, that's also there for people to work through, and each week there's a whole variety of meditations people can use and see what suits them. And most of them have a 10-minute version, 20-minute version, and a half,
great.
so that people can choose what length of time they'd like to go. And we suggest them doing a couple of times a day if it's 10 minutes, once a day if it's 20 minutes, with maybe a half hour as a treat once a week.
Oh, wonderful. And I'll include all of that. Really want to thank you. I'm wondering, any final thoughts you have for anyone who's on the fence of giving mindfulness a try?
Well, I remember John Kabat-Zinn saying, "What have you got to lose?"
Right.
And one of the things is, well, you might say, well, I've got to lose all this time I'm going to spend meditating. But one of the things that we found is that when people are more aware and make wiser choices about how they spend their time, it releases more time than it takes to meditate. Because often we exhaust ourselves switching between things in an unaware way.
Right.
And we now know research that when you switch a lot, it not only exhausts you, but actually takes longer to get back to where you and so just switching less each day and making an active, mindful choice rather than a mindless choice, which most of us make about things, can enable you to gain a much greater sense of just doing one task, finishing that off, laying it down, and then before you take up another task, rather than
this myth of multitasking, right?
Multitasking,
yeah.
So that it's there for people, but there's nothing compelling if people have other ways of reducing their stress, of work, of being with their family. Then they don't need to meditate and do mindfulness. There's lots of different ways,
right?
So, there's nothing compelling about it. They don't need to feel they're missing out, but there it is if they want to try it at any time. But there's nothing compelling about it. There's not, it's always going to be there for them if they want.
Right. To see for themselves. I know one of the teachers early on when I began my journey is just going to, see for yourself. And
Yes,
if you want to
absolutely.
see, it might be a fit, may not, but see for yourself. And this exploratory process.
Really helpful.
Well, thank you so much again. Deep bow of gratitude to you. Really appreciate your wisdom and your kindness. And I want to also thank everyone for watching, for listening. Really appreciate your time. If you found this useful and helpful, I'd appreciate if you can share. And if you haven't done already, click that subscribe button. It can really help me out in spreading this work and be able to share more content and reach to more guests. So I'd really appreciate if you do so. And if you're interested in taking a look at upcoming events and programs, including free information sessions about mindfulness, about laughter, retreats, meditation programs, feel free to visit our website, centerformindfulness.ca. Thank you again. May your moments be filled with ease and may you be present with as many of them.